scene, the meeting, the scene that the movie hinges on. Take me into filming that.
You mean the scene with Matt and Viola? We're on the phone?
No.
Oh, you mean the pitch?
meeting? Yeah, the pitch.
The final scene, that's... I guess I'll start it. That was a real meeting that took place. You saw from some of the cards, we reproduced some of the images of the sign they put up and the video they showed. And it was, it was the only time I had everybody there together. And so my main memory of it is just thinking how good all these actors were. Wow, I don't know if this will ever happen again. This is amazing. And it was really, it's just joyful. A lot of times as you come up and talk about it, there are things that I planned and things that I wanted to do. But the truth is, probably not unlike basketball. If you've got the dream team, it doesn't take that much coaching, and this was really a dream team of filmmakers. Viola, Julius, Matt, Chris Messina, Chris Tucker, Chris, added a ton of material and life to it, and it was, I felt like a bystander. It was a gift.
And we have to give a shout out to Jason Bateman as well.
Jason, too.
There's one shot in there that I really loved between Viola and Julius, where they kind of exchange a glance that says like a million words.
Yeah, when they were in a scene together, I was always like, just always stay with the two of them because they're married. It doesn't matter what kind of day they're having or what they do, it's going to be real. You see people who can talk to each other by doing this. It says volume. Beautiful. The two of them are magnificent artists. It was a joy.
Viola, what was it like having Julius on set with?
It felt like home. And that one exchange that we had where, Matt is coming in, comes to our house, and he's coming in the backyard, and, James doesn't quite know who he is. And it's like, Deloris, I'll be here, okay? And I said, okay, baby. That's me and Julius. Julius loves his baseball bat.
It's that protective nature that any husband would protect his wife. She's talking to this guy now. I really like this guy. I like Sonny in my mind, and I'm thinking this is something good. But I just want her to know I got your back, baby.
I like everything that's good in the movie. It was they just did it. I just got out of the way.
So Ben and Matt, you guys of course have a prolific collaboration going back years and decades, but this was the first time that you were directing Matt. So how was that experience for both of you?
Well, it might seem like the first time he's directed.
It's not the first time I've carried it, but it's the first time.
I mean, we did high school plays where he was like, listen, dude, I think you should do it like this instead. He's been directing me for like 40-something years. No, but honestly, it was just a kind of a natural progression to, because we've written a bunch of movies and produced and acted together for, so many years and decades. And so it didn't feel any different to be working this way. It's just kind of a natural progression.
I've gotten that question a lot. I keep thinking, should it have felt different? Because it was exactly the same. And what was really wonderful about it was, I love and trust Matt so much, and it was so lovely to be working together. It was kind of like a feeling of, I want the other actors to feel it, come on and go, hey, look, it's all good. I love actors. I love you. You're going to be okay. You're going to be able to do whatever you want. Take as much time as you want. Do what you need to do and be respected, and just to kind of project that energy and put people at ease. That was the only reason. It's usually just me and him talking, together, right? But like to see how these people like really love us and respect us, and him as an extension of that energy kind of validated, like I guess he's not full of shit, what he's saying.
So the last thing that you guys did was like a 14th century feudal epic.
Kind of like this.
Similar. Clearly, you guys have no shortage of ideas. How did you even land on doing this one?
Well, you should, because I got the script from you.
I got the script, and it was there was really good stuff in it, and I thought, oh, this is an interesting idea. What I was drawn to initially about it was that it kind of mirrored what we were trying to do with this company that we were starting, which was about knowing your worth and self-respect and taking risks, and that was what I thought it was. But I also was like, well, there aren't any African American people in this movie, which doesn't seem very realistic, and it doesn't seem like the right way to tell this story. And I'm not sure exactly what the real story is, but Michael Jordan, who's the most cool, intimidating guy in the world, was like, said, "I'll sit down with you." And I went and sat down and had lunch. And I said, first of all, I won't do this movie if you don't want me to do it to start with, because it's just a show of reverence and respect for you. And he said, I said, and I have to, change some details and stuff, but I think there's more to the story than this, and I don't want to do anything that feels fundamentally wrong to you, obviously. And he said, he said, look, here's what I care about. George Raveling, I wouldn't be a Nike without him. I said, okay, that's in the movie. And Marlon Wayans, because he was on the Olympic, the events when he met Raveling is prior to this movie, but nonetheless, the movie takes a detour to point that out. And he said, Howard White has to be in the movie. Okay, and Howard White in it. I found out, and the first thing I thought was, I said, who's Howard? He described him to me, and I was like, maybe I can get Chris Tucker. I can work with Chris Tucker. I've always wanted to work with Chris Tucker. And he was like, I know Chris. Chris knows everybody. So then I was like, okay, great. This guy Howard White, and he started telling me about that. And I said, you want to obviously respect us. Your parents have a couple of lines in the movie appear briefly. Is there anything that matters to you, or you'd like me to add or say or not? He said, my dad had the best personality I've ever known. I said, and we got the right guy for that. Now, this guy is amazing. Everybody loves him. And I said, and then he totally took me off guard because he got this change of his look on his face, where this incredibly powerful, intimidating guy got a kind of sense of awe and humility, smallness. He was like, but my mama, she just runs shit. I said, really? He said, yeah, I didn't want to go to work. She made me go. I would have done the whole deal for a red Mercedes. I was your whole sneaker race for a red Mercedes? That's right. My mom. She said, Michael, get up. We're going to Oregon. I said, I don't want to go. I'm playing Nintendo. She told him, and then he indicated to me how meaningful and important it was, and I just thought, first of all, I felt stupid because why didn't I assume this? But then I felt really happy because I thought, now I know what the movie is, what it's about, and it's much more meaningful. And then I panicked because I said, who should play her? He's like, it's got to be Viola Davis. In the world, no problem. 2 lines right now. And he's like, well, make it happen. So we set out to create a role that was both appropriate, that fitting, that honored who clearly his mother was to him, and who I believe there are other mothers who have played similar roles in similar lives who have been kind of unsung. And here I am, not even assuming that. I go, okay, and then it's got to be good enough for Viola to do. How do I do that? So we just worked and worked and worked and worked to come up and get back to that idea of self-worth. And then when I went to Viola, I was like, look, you probably don't want to do this, but Michael Jordan wants you to. And then I let her, brilliant, just rewrite stuff, throw it out, add such the best lines in. The shoe is just a shoe, that's her line, all the great stuff. She wrote, she did, she came in, nailed it, and everyone just sat around like, oh my God.
Michael once randomly outside the Park Hyatt Hotel. His wife like How to Get Away with Murder.
Well, you made an impression.
Can you talk about the relationship between you and Matt in the film, which is, again, like another thing that it really hinges on, like that has to work. So can you guys talk about crafting that, making that shine through?
Okay, well, I can tell you what it's like to go to work with Viola Davis. Here's what it's like. You wake up, you show up to set 7 o'clock in the morning, you go up, you rehearse with Ben, with Bob Richardson, our DP. It's just us, 7-page scene, kind of walk through it a few times, just figure out where we're going to put the camera. Go get ready, come back. by 10:30 in the morning, you've done the best scene in your life. And you're an hour and a half out of lunch, and Viola's like, what are we doing now? You know, and that was really the experience of working with her. It was just like, we went through this movie so fast. We weren't trying to rush, but because of the architecture of the script, there were all these long scenes. Like, we ran into this with Good Will Hunting. We had a lot of these 5-page scenes in Good Will Hunting, and normally for a movie, you know, a 2-page scene is pretty long. I could do like a full Bourne movie and have maybe one scene that's, you know, 2.5 pages. This movie had a ton of like 5, 6, 7-page scenes. And the thing is, when you're working with, you know, somebody like Viola or you know, Jason or Chris or, you know, Matt, like you know what you're doing, and like you can do it relatively quickly. There are not a lot of entrances and exits, not a lot of, hey, we got to hold for the, you know, we got to reset the 8 cars that are going to crash into each other. So the scenes go really, really quickly, and we found ourselves, you know, we were supposed to shoot this in, I think we budgeted 33 days. We were done in 24 days, and we couldn't slow down, which was part of the model that we're using at Artist Equity, and the people that were very, very experienced people that we're hiring, and very experienced actors. And that's really kind of what ended up happening. Was I woke up every day and went to work and was opposite a hero of mine, and by lunchtime I had, you know, a 5, 6, 7-page scene in the bag, and then we were just trying to figure out what we were going to do after lunch.
You know, because so many of the scenes you have to be a great observer and a great listener. Those are the 2 things with acting. You know, people feel like, you know, you're only involved when you're speaking, but especially with playing Deloris, all she does is observe and listen. She's gathering data. She's gathering information before she comes in with the kill. Because I know my mama, May Alice Davis, I don't know if she would have brokered the deal. She would have taken her wig off and maybe put on some boxing gloves, you know, to broker the deal. But where does that come from? Seriously, no one had ever done that before. So, and I'm not talking about the fact that she's a mom, whatever kind of preconceived notions you can have in your mind. She's sort of the mom, she's African American, where does that mindset come from? So I had to really observe Sonny, especially because he's coming to my house. It's like, you know, she said, no, you can't come inside my house. You come in the backyard. You know, so that was especially difficult for me.
Well, I think you nailed it. So. As the credits told us, the real Pete passed away, like I think prior to the movie going into production. But did any of you have a chance to speak with him or give it a name?
I didn't, although that was one of the other things I actually now remember that Michael observed. I said, oh, there's Tinker Hatfield. He said, hey, Tinker Hatfield didn't do the first show. Really? He said, no, Pete Moore. He wasn't there at all? No. And that, he was like, that's not, you know, took very seriously what he knew. I can speak to what I know and not what I don't. But that was who did it. And so because Tinker Hatfield's a more well-known, I think, kind of in the name of shoe culture, and kind of got into there and assumed the role.
And was in the script. That we read.
Was in the script. And it was Moore who did both the obviously you saw the one and the silhouette, and you know, pretty good designs. And I love that we found these pictures of him like golfing and hanging out with Michael. That just made me feel like, you know, that they were friends. He appreciated it. You know, I mean, I think everybody wanted to be Michael's friend, but nonetheless, he was a brilliant, and I liked the idea because at that time there was this really strange, obscure oddity that a person might be fixated on basketball shoes, you know, and now it's completely commonplace. And the idea that a brand and a person are synonymous in some ways is totally generally accepted. Like a brand used to be Sears, you know, and Goodyear, and it had nothing to do with people or meaning or Michael, they did that, created that whole idea that we all take for granted now, and it did have a kind of ripple effect throughout other industries and it's not that it's arrived at a equitable place, in my view now, but it was, as Deloris said, the first step of somebody going, hold on, if I accomplish this and create a vast fortune for you, based on what I do every day, shouldn't I participate in that? which is the difference between like ownership, right, and
Being an
fee,
employee.
salary. You're lucky to be here.
Yeah.
No, and that's why she said it won't be the NBA promoting my son. It'll be the other way around. And they're about to put him as the NBA symbol. And he plays Jerry West, and it literally is the other way around.
Matthew, how did you craft your performance?
Good question. I hope everyone has some time. No, I'm just kidding. I found out that Peter passed away basically a week before I was offered a role, and so I was disappointed. But I watched a lot of documentaries and read a lot about him, and it's hard. He was a genius, and a genius similar to athletes, where it's like getting geniuses to talk about what they do, it's kind of boring. He's just like, well, I had this idea and I wrote it, I drew it. It's like athletes talking about at the end of an amazing game. They're like, well, we played a good game, and it's like, how do you describe getting to the mind of somebody who's so good at what they do? And so I just sort of took that for granted, because it's like, maybe he doesn't feel like he's good. He just is like, I'm just a lonely guy who's going through a midlife crisis, who's really interested in this one thing, and luckily I have a job, but what's happening with the job? And just thinking about, I sort of had to let go of the real guy and just dive into the script itself. And one great thing about the script and about the movie that I think is that it's based on real events, but the drama itself is self-contained, and Ben really encouraged us to make our mark, and he really had a vision of the characters as just existing in the movie as characters. Charlize, the amazing costume designer, she asked me, she politely, I think, was like, "Did you have any ideas for the costume?" And I was like, well, I mean, he wears a lot of turtlenecks, I guess, he wears a lot of sport outfits. And I went to my fitting, and she had all these amazing, beautiful, great sweaters, these completely specific and idiosyncratic ideas for what to wear. And then she was like, I also got you a turtleneck. And I was like, stop it. Please, put away your turtleneck. This is amazing, And my process was really, this is the third time I've worked with Ben, and each time I've worked with him, really, my experience has been you go
Concern, fear.
Desperation. No, everything is figured out. Every single thing is figured out by the time you arrive on set. The best people in the world at their job have already worked out every single aspect of it. Bob, the costume designers, everything, the AD department, the best in the world. And the only thing that hasn't been figured out is just the one thing that you have to do. Just the one moment that is going to happen now that you have to create. And so it's just this So a lot of the character, I have to say, was just sort of I had all these ideas, but I could let them go and just sort of exist in the moment of the scene. And that's what happened. I mean, I think that's the environment that Ben creates on his sets, where it's just now just have fun and let's just see what happens. Because every other thing, all the Navy SEALs, the film crews are just all around you, just helping you, So basically, I did a bunch of research and then I let it go and I had a good time.
So Ben, you're obviously behind the camera for the most part in this one, but for the times that you are on screen, you're playing Phil kind of as an eccentric, which felt like a different flavor for you. Is that fair to say?
I really like what people think of as character roles. I don't like to play parts where it's, well, you can't do this, well, our guy can't do that. He's got to, because I think what's really interesting about us is our flaws and our fears and our weaknesses and the things we try to hide and pretend we don't have or we don't feel. To hear this great speech and have the one moment stick out that you feel what do you mean everyone's going to be forgotten? I'm not going to be forgotten. You know what I mean? That's fear, right? That's you're afraid people aren't going to see you and see what you've done, and Meanwhile, the whole world sees you. And now I don't know if that's Phil Knight, but I know that that's a human quality, and it's really interesting. And it's both that he was willing to do it and say, yeah, okay, they should participate, and also that it's panicked. I destroyed everything. I shouldn't have done that. And I think that, honestly, I like the contrasts in the idea of the person who is, because I've studied and read a lot about Buddhism and interested in that myself, and the idea that you can be drawn to Buddhism and be a capitalist magnate. They feel like the inherent hypocrisy is there. Plus, I just think everyone likes to make fun of the boss. You know there had to be something, so you got to give them something to make fun of, and I had fun, and also still eccentric, brilliant, not in this exact way, I'm sure, but the spirit, again, was the thing I was trying to capture. And honestly, I trust all of these people so much, and they're all so good, that I just could do a take, and I just could look at the faces of the other actors and go, oh, I'll go again. Or I was like, yeah, I think it's pretty good. And it was like a joy for me to just be in there in the safety of that and that spirit, and it was a blast.
All right, let's open it up for some audience questions if there are any out there.
Well, the movie's great. Congratulations to everybody. Matt, I spent my whole life saying that I gained weight for this role when I'm playing there, and I've never lost it. Did you gain weight for this role? And how do you do it?
Gaining weight is the easiest thing to do. You know that. No, I did have a little extra weight on me, but then he put me in a bodysuit on top of that. I was like, yeah, and
I'm like, I'm tired of people saying this guy's better looking than me. Let's put this to rest. We're gonna do a little effect with the lens.
Yeah, no, but we also like the idea that and it was in the script, that a lot of the people who work for close to athletes idolize athletes, but they aren't athletic themselves, and there are all these jokes, and the contrast between Phil, who's an avid runner, and Sonny, who's like, a lot of it was for that visual joke where I get into profile and he's like, did you run? And I'm like, no, I don't run, Phil. But that idea of that contradiction.
It's that thing of like, we're people, like you putting them in the movies that are idealized versions of people just is less interesting to me. Like, when I watch this person, then I just go, well, I'm not that. I don't, but it's sort of the Instagram effect. It's everyone's advertised self. But like, actually, who you feel empathy for, and that's my job, is to try to create empathy.
And by the way, the movies, what we grew up watching and loving, and why we wanted to be actors, like if you look at those movies in the 70s, like Pacino and Hackman, and these actors, it was all about these flawed people, right? And that was what made us go, wow, like that is something I want to do. And it's kind of metastasized into this kind of idealized, like, like it's like looking at somebody's Instagram account sometimes. Like you just look at a movie and you're like, God, everyone's got a trainer. You know what I mean? Like, wow, everyone's on a diet and has a trainer. Like,
everyone's in Tahiti with their best life. They call you like, I'm miserable. I just saw you, man, your story.
Oftentimes in movies, specifically in sports movies, the big speech is hard to live up to. How close to reality was that speech? And from both you, Matt, and then your perspective, like what went into
that speech and
well, a lot of it plays off camera.
Yeah. There's stuff we wrote. We were writing it up until into ADR, because we were trying to strike the balance of what we really needed in that scene, and what we talked about a lot, and what we all talked about was it's a different speech for the different people in the room. Michael's hearing one thing, his father's hearing one thing, and most importantly, his mother's hearing something totally different. His mother is the one person who's looking at this and going like, it's not all going to be great. Like, this is a burden that's being put on my son, and like being that icon, being that thing, right, is it starts out, it feels like this is everything I always wanted, but there's much more to it, and it's much more complicated, and in a way
that's where it was. It only worked, the speech and the flashforwards. You break all those rules. They don't feel that strange because we're so familiar with what we've already brought imaginatively and from our memories about Michael Jordan, and really it's her, what she sees. like Matt said, they're all worried about, is he going to be great or not? Is he going to get there or not? Is he going to do it? Including, I think, him. And she's, who believes, yes, it's very likely, and also, my son's going to feel alone. And what if he loses his father? And what if he feels completely isolated because of how great he in fact ends up being? I thought that was beautiful and wise and prescient, and I loved then, also wanted to sort of find that heartbreaking thing because actually Matt's father passed away recently, who I was very close to, and I often remember him in I remember him smiling, so good to me. I loved him so much, and I want to juxtapose, to talk about Michael's father who passed away in this, very tragic way, and I wanted it shot just right next to Julius he's so proud of his son. I love that about what he does. He's looking at that with the terrible song that doesn't work and the presentation, and he loves it. He watches his son play for 3 days, and it's just beautiful, and he's enjoying it, and that same energy, and then you say, and we lose people. Take them away, people that love us, people proud of us, and then we're without them, and so it is about speaking to the complexities of life in the future, and a mother that's mindful of it, and it was an idea that was in the script, and also, interestingly enough, when I actually we decided to show Film Life, which seemed like a good idea until I saw myself stealing the good and plenties, and I was about to go out there, and I was like, maybe they won't be happy with it. And he was incredibly gracious, and he said, you got the spirit of it. He was like, there are a couple of factual, and I said, I know. I'm sure there are a lot of factual. It's not about being factual, it's about, perfectly rigidly factual. It's about being essentially true. He said, I was just going to say that it was Rob who really gave that speech. Now, this is a guy who, after the Jordan deal, Jason Bateman's character, left for Adidas because success also creates greed and competition and credit. And I didn't want to put that at the end of the movie because I wanted people to feel good and be inspired, but the downside is Adidas came and chased Rob, and Sonny left, and everyone was taking credit, and I'm the genius, and what's your relationship with Michael? And Phil felt profoundly betrayed and hurt, and called the great betrayal of his life. Rob died of a heart attack a couple of years later. And I got the sense that there was lingering acrimony, and then he's older now, he's 84 years old, and I thought it was kind of beautiful. He looked and he said it was Rob who gave that speech. It didn't seem like a guy who was generous in that particular way in his book, and then he just said, we were friends. We were trying to do something, and what Michael did was just incredible. I never could have imagined. But he also gave me an article from Forbes magazine in 1984 that said, you need no further evidence that Nike has permanently lost its way than the fact that they just paid Michael Jordan, who has never set foot on a professional basketball court, $250,000. They didn't even know about the percentage.
Hi, Morgan Morrell. Okay, so we all know TV shows and movies go through a bunch of edits. So I want to know, was there a scene that didn't make the final cut that you had a hard time letting go of?
No. Everything that we shot was everyone was great, and the one scene I had to cut out, I totally blew it and gave the actor the wrong direction. Really good actor, Tom Papa, who played Stu Inman, who the young man refers to at the end, they should fire Stu. Sonny had a brief encounter with Stu Inman where he asked him, why didn't you draft Jordan?
Stu Inman was the general manager of Portland who had the second pick in the draft, and he very famously didn't draft Michael Jordan. So we had a scene where I went and talked to Tom about why didn't you draft him? But
I made the mistake of directing them to play it in a way that presupposed that both of them kind of knew who Michael was going to be, and that he was defensive and covering up. It was my mistake. That's the direction I gave him, and then I saw it and I was like, no, he should believe he's right. He should believe he's great, So I blew it. And also, the truth is, the audience will give you, okay, we know they're eventually going to get him on this shoe deal, but that's the movie. What they won't give you is how long until they figure out that's what they want to do. That first act period is what, okay, lay the exposition, then we've got to start telling the story, because in fact, I've noticed it's an increasingly brief period at the beginning of the movies where audiences will grant you simply wait to exposition.
Thank you. Ben, question. So we all know Nike gave that rev share to, I'm sorry, I'm waiting for the mic. Thank you. So we learned, we all know Nike gave that revenue share to Michael Jordan. What wasn't said was the percentage. So two questions. Do you know what that percentage was? And the second question is, when you sat down with Michael, did he ask for a revenue share of the movie?
No, by the way, and and that's why I'm quite mindful of the fact of not exploiting or using or appropriating Michael or using to promote the movie and saying this is endorsed by Michael Jordan. This is the Michael Jordan story. Just to be very clear, it's not. And so I'm only comfortable talking about my conversations with him to the extent that people understand, A, that I would not have made the movie without his consent, no matter what. And B, what I want to know is what was truthful and important to him. And C, he gave me all the good ideas. But other than that, like the conversations I have with him are private, and he owns the rights to his story. And if he wants to make the story of Michael Jordan one day, I hope he gets a very big rev share of that because he deserves it.
But he did have a revenue share at the beginning, and from my understanding, a few years later, when that contract was up, there was a renegotiation.
The one thing we didn't include in the movie was that it was a 3-year deal. And then it turned out Nike couldn't afford not to have Air Jordan. So the revenue share changed.
Hi there. I'm way back here. So maybe this is an obvious question, but what went into the decision? Was it Michael's decision not to have the young Michael's face shown? And also, who was that young man, by the way? I'm just curious about that specifically.
It was not Michael's decision. I didn't ever plan on it because I never thought for a second that Michael is so magnificent, so famous. The whole reason why he represents and means what he does in terms of greatness and excellence is because he's so enigmatic and majestic and identifiable immediately by his carriage and demeanor and what we've seen him do physically, that the one sure way to ruin the movie and have the audience understand that the whole thing is a fraud is to point the camera at anybody, and that's not Michael Jordan, and say, hey, that's Michael Jordan. Because all of a sudden they're like, this is the knockoff Michael Jordan. You know what I mean? He's too famous, and I like him being, he's like a guy, he's above it. He's how our relationship is with these icons and idols. Like, they're not in our living rooms, in our lives. They're people who are in our fantasy. So it's like the idea of, imagine all these young people become successful in a lot of different industries, and they're like these rockets, and the amount of people that gravitate and circle and go around them and obsess about them, and it just makes you think how much he needed that guidance and relied on it, and kind of reinforces that central theme. And also, the only person who could play Michael Jordan, as I said to him, is too old now to play Michael Jordan.
All right, I think that's all our time. Thank you guys for the great questions. Please, let's give it up to these guys.